definitely tzei ulamad. You should definitely go and study. But not everyone's going to study the Holocaust, for extensively. You'll read a book, you'll read a couple of articles, whatever. Few people will actually study it in depth, and that's normal. But I think that we need to remember the horrors and the potential, but also think of some of the few bright spots that are there that we need to build on as much as possible. And I'll point to two. One of them is Jewish initiative. The Jews were trapped, they were surrounded, they were weaponless, there was no such thing as a Jewish army that they could look to and say, hey, defend us in some way. They had to make all these things out of scratch if they wanted to. And the extent of Jewish initiative to try to do things to, on the one hand, remain human and Jewish, and on the other hand, to try to stay alive and help others stay alive, it's remarkable. Many of them didn't succeed in staying alive, but the extent to it, how widespread that is really striking. Just one small detail of that. In the same area, the general government of Poland that we talked about before, Warsaw, Lublin, and those areas where about 2 million Jews were murdered. We don't know the exact number, but just from indications from various sources that we have, it would seem that perhaps 200,000 or more successfully fled the liquidations of their communities, whether it was a ghetto or not a formal ghetto, but at the point of liquidating the community, managed to get away in one fashion or another. Nearly all of those people were caught and killed. But I'm pointing to the initiative, right, that Jews took. In the area of western Belarus, northwestern Belarus, where there's a lot of dense forest, there was a lot of Soviet partisan activity, and because it's dense forest, there was a lot of Jewish partisan activity, anti-Nazi partisan activity that developed. But the Jewish partisan activity alongside it had what they call family camps. People who were civilians, Jewish civilians who fled, were never going to carry a weapon because some of them simply couldn't. They're too old, they're injured, they're too young, they're little kids or something. And the ones who could carry weapons, bring them all out and protect them, like the Bielski partisans, who ultimately, at the end of the war, had more than 1,200 people in the forest, the overwhelming majority of whom were not fighters. They were the civilians living in a kind of town in the forest. All that initiative, the escapes, and all the trying to get false identities and hiding in various places, sometimes on their own, sometimes with assistance from others. But Jewish initiative all over the place is quite striking, and we need to bear that in mind. And it cuts across everything that we see everywhere where there are Jews and Nazis or their helpers trying to get at the Jews. The other bright spot that there were too few of, but there were, of course, are the righteous among the nations. And the fact that Yad Vashem is honored a little over 28,000 so far, you say, wow, when Yad Vashem began to develop a program, how do we honor these people? It's mandated in the law that's what we're supposed to do, figure out a way to honor the righteous among the nations, people not Jewish who risked their lives to save Jews. It's not a question of if they succeed or not, it's a question if they took risk or not and tried to save Jews and without ulterior motives, just trying to save these people. And when they initially began it in the early 60s, say, we'll find a few hundred, we'll plant these trees along the avenue at the beginning of Yad Vashem, and then we'll cover the subject. Well, the avenue was full by 1990 with 2,100 trees. Not some of the trees were planted in honor of several people, like a family or a group or something like that. So it's far more individuals. And now we're up to more than 28,000. So, wow, that's a lot, but it's nothing. There are certainly more than we found because we can't get to every story. So there are probably people out there we never found out about. No one came to tell us, or maybe that they were killed and the people they rescued were killed and there was no one to tell us that. So there's certainly more out there, and no one knows how many. Is it the same number? Can we double it? I don't know. But it's not millions. Now, there are many reasons for that. People were afraid. The Nazis threatened, if you help Jews, we'll kill you. So there are lots of disincentives. Can you risk yourself, risk your family, risk your village or whatever to help these people? So there were those who didn't help because they're afraid, and they had reason to be afraid. The problem is, how many were there who hunted Jews? Not failed to help, maybe out of fear, but joined the hunt or led the hunt. And it's clear that those people far outnumber those who tried to help Jews. But with that, we still need to latch on to those who tried to help as a kind of little dot of light in the darkness. Say, how do we expand that? And I don't have the answer to that. There's lots of social psychological research on trying to figure out what is the profile of these people, and it's come up with no answers. It's come up with lots of answers, but none of them is the answer. And there apparently is no profile, but we have to try to figure out, how do we create more of those? That goes back to the earlier subject of why do we commemorate? How do we create more people like that, and far fewer people who join the hunt? And maybe that changes the balance.